My name is Mark Peterson, and I used to believe my life was the embodiment of suburban bliss. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 10 years. We had 2 kids, Lily and Max, who brought joy to our world, and we were surrounded by the comforting routines of family life. My best friend, Tom, was practically a part of the family. We'd known each other since college, bonded over football games, late-night study sessions, and shared dreams of making it big. Tom was charming in a way that always seemed to make people gravitate toward him. He was my best man at our wedding and the guy I'd call whenever life threw a curveball. Emily liked him too. They shared jokes, teased me about my quirks, and sometimes it felt like our little circle was unbreakable. But life has a way of revealing cracks in the most seemingly solid structures. It started subtly. A change in Emily's tone when she spoke about Tom, her laughter at his jokes lingering a little too long. I dismissed it as paranoia. After all, Emily and I were rock solid. Or so I thought. The moment that cracked my trust came one Saturday evening when Emily said she was heading to the store to grab a few things for dinner. She didn't return until 2 hours later, the groceries melting in the trunk while her face glowed in a way that had nothing to do with errands. When I asked where she'd been, her response was too smooth, too rehearsed. Something didn't sit right. Still, I shoved the doubts down, buried them deep under the weight of a decade of love and trust. But now, looking back, I see the signs were all there. The stolen glances, the whispered conversations, the way she always seemed to be a little too invested in what Tom had to say. It wasn't until I found the first real piece of evidence that my world truly began to unravel. It was a Tuesday night, and Emily was running late from work again. She'd been working longer hours lately, always claiming that her company was pushing hard for the upcoming quarter. I didn't question it much. She'd always been ambitious. I admired that about her. With the kids in bed and my work emails cleared, I decided to pass the time by cleaning up the living room. Emily's phone buzzed on the couch. I wasn't one to snoop, but the screen lit up with a message that caught my attention. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible." It was from Tom. I froze, the vacuum whirring idly in the background as my mind scrambled to make sense of the words. Maybe it was a joke, I told myself. Tom had always been a bit of a joker, maybe even too much at times. Still, something felt off. I sat down, staring at the phone as if willing the message to explain itself. Against my better judgment, I unlocked the phone. Her password was our anniversary date, a detail that now felt bitterly ironic. The chat history was a punch to the gut. Playful banter quickly gave way to intimate confessions and explicit details that made me feel sick. Phrases like, "miss the way you," and "our little secret" were sprinkled throughout, leaving no room for misinterpretation. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. My chest tightened, and the room spun. Memories of every laugh they shared, every dinner we had together, and every harmless gesture now felt like a cruel mockery of my blind trust. When Emily finally came home that night, I couldn't even look at her. The weight of what I'd seen hung between us like a storm cloud, but I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed time to process, to decide what to do next. Betrayal was a word I'd never thought I'd associate with my life, but now it was all I could feel. The days that followed were a haze of confusion and quiet fury. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything except replaying moments in my head, searching for the ones I'd overlooked. Like the time Emily insisted Tom stay for dinner after our Sunday game nights, even when I was ready to kick him out. Or when they laughed at inside jokes that didn't seem all that funny to me but had them practically in tears. I started keeping my distance from Emily, watching her instead. She'd smile at me like nothing was wrong, kiss me on the cheek before leaving for work, and hum while she made breakfast. But now, every small gesture felt tainted, like a counterfeit version of the love I thought we shared. The worst part was pretending everything was fine. I had to go to work, help Lily with her math homework, cheer Max on at soccer practice, all while feeling like I was living in a glass house about to shatter. I decided to dig deeper. If what I saw in those texts was real, there had to be more, and I was determined to find it. Late one night, after Emily had gone to bed, I logged into our shared phone account. It didn't take long to confirm my worst fears. Her call history with Tom was damning. Lengthy conversations at odd hours and frequent messages exchanged during her so-called late nights at work. It was all there, staring me in the face. I had the proof, but I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I wanted to see how far this went, how long this betrayal had been simmering beneath the surface of my life. What I didn't expect was how much it would consume me. Every time I saw her, I had to fight the urge to scream, to demand answers. But I knew I had to be patient. I needed to know the full story before I made my move. What I didn't realize was that waiting would cost me more than I ever imagined. The moment came sooner than I thought. I had planned to gather more evidence, to meticulously piece everything together before confronting Emily or Tom. But life has a way of throwing you headfirst into the fire when you least expect it. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon, and Emily had taken the kids to her parents' house for the weekend. She insisted I stay behind to get some rest. I'd welcomed the solitude. It gave me a chance to think, to strategize. Around 2 p.m., I stepped outside to grab the mail. That's when I saw it. Tom's car, parked just a few houses down. At first, I told myself it couldn't be what I thought. Maybe he was visiting someone else. Maybe this was a coincidence. But then I saw him, walking out of my neighbor's backyard with Emily by his side. They were laughing, heads tilted too close together, their shoulders brushing. The way she looked at him, it was like I wasn't even in the picture. That was the final blow. The texts, the calls, the late nights. They could all be dismissed as misunderstandings if I tried hard enough. But seeing her with him, so carefree and comfortable, broke something in me. I ducked back inside before they could see me, slamming the door harder than I intended. My hands were shaking, my pulse pounding in my ears. I paced the living room, torn between storming out to confront them and holding my ground. What was she even thinking, bringing him here? Did she assume I wouldn't notice? Or was she testing the limits of my oblivion? I peeked out the window again and saw them walking toward Tom's car. They stood there for a moment, talking, before Emily leaned in and hugged him. It wasn't the kind of hug you'd give a friend. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay put. I needed to keep my composure, but my patience was wearing thin. If this wasn't rock bottom, I didn't want to imagine what was. As the car drove off, Emily strolled back toward the house, a lightness in her step that made my blood boil. I knew I couldn't let this slide much longer. The confrontation was coming. I could feel it. Emily walked through the front door with her usual bright smile, carrying a small bag from the local bakery. "I brought your favorite," she said, setting it on the counter as if nothing had happened. I stared at her, my stomach twisting into knots. How could she look so casual, so unbothered, after what I'd just witnessed? "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Her head snapped up, her expression momentarily faltering before she recovered. "I went to pick up some pastries and stopped by the park to clear my head." "Why?" Her lies came so easily, so effortlessly. I couldn't believe I'd ever trusted her. "No reason," I replied, forcing a tight smile. "Just curious." For the rest of the day, I pretended like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was seething. I couldn't stop picturing her with Tom. The way she'd laughed at something he said. The way her hand had lingered on his arm. That night, as she sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. The silence between us was suffocating, every unspoken word pressing down on my chest. "Emily?" I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She looked up, startled. "What's wrong?" "I think we need to talk," I said, my heart pounding. Her face paled slightly, but she quickly masked it with a look of concern. "Of course. What is it?" I hesitated, the words caught in my throat. Part of me wanted to lay everything out. The texts, the calls, what I'd seen earlier that day. But another part of me wasn't ready. I needed to see if she'd come clean on her own. "Have you been happy lately?" I asked, my tone softening. "I mean, with us." Her brow furrowed, and she set her phone down. "Why would you ask that?" "Of course I'm happy. Why wouldn't I be?" I studied her face, searching for any cracks in her armor. "I don't know. You've just seemed distracted lately." She laughed nervously, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Work's been stressful, and the kids keep me busy. But you know I love you, right? The words sounded hollow, rehearsed. She leaned forward to kiss me, but I pulled back just enough to make it awkward. Is there anything you want to tell me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Her smile wavered, and for a split second, I thought she might confess. But instead, she shook her head, her eyes wide and innocent.
No.
Why? Is something wrong? Nothing? I lied, standing up and walking toward the stairs. Forget I said anything. As I climbed into bed that night, I realized something. I couldn't wait for her to come clean. She wouldn't. If I wanted the truth, I'd have to drag it out of her myself. And I was more than ready to do just that. The truth wouldn't come from Emily. I knew that much. If I wanted answers, I'd have to go to Tom, the man I'd trusted with everything, who was supposed to have my back no matter what. The opportunity presented itself the next day when I saw Tom at the gym. We had a standing tradition of working out together a few times a week, though lately, his schedule had mysteriously aligned less with mine. "Hey, Mark," he called out, his voice too cheerful as he walked over. "It's been a while, man." I forced a smile, gripping his hand in a shake that lingered just a bit too long. "Yeah, it has." For the next hour, we lifted weights and exchanged small talk, the way we always did. But beneath the surface, I was boiling. Every joke he made, every easy grin, felt like a slap in the face. As we finished up, I saw my chance. "Let's grab a drink," I suggested. "There's something I've been meaning to talk to you about." He hesitated, his confident facade slipping for just a moment before he nodded. "Sure, let's do it." We found a quiet corner at a nearby bar, and I wasted no time. "Tom," I began, my voice low and even, "is there something going on between you and Emily?" His reaction was almost imperceptible. A slight twitch of his jaw, the flicker of panic in his eyes. But he recovered quickly, laughing it off. "What? No, man. What makes you think that?" I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "Don't lie to me. I've seen the texts. I've seen the way you two act around each other. If there's something I need to know, now's the time to come clean." Tom's face went pale, and for the first time in all the years I'd known him, he looked genuinely cornered. "Mark, I swear, it's not what you think," he stammered. "What do I think, Tom?" I shot back, my voice rising. "That my wife and my best friend are sneaking around behind my back? That the two people I trusted most are stabbing me in the back?" He looked away, running a hand through his hair. "It's complicated," he finally muttered. "Uncomplicate it," I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. "Tell me the truth or I swear to God, I'll find another way to get it." Tom sighed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Okay," he said quietly, "but it's not what you think. It was just a mistake. A stupid, one-time thing." I stared at him, my chest tightening as his words sank in. He was admitting it. He was admitting to betraying me. "One time," I repeated, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "That's the best you can do? One time? Like that makes it any better?" "Mark, I didn't mean for it to happen," he pleaded, his voice desperate. It just did."
I am sorry, man."
"I never wanted to hurt you." I stood up, my fists clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. "You didn't just hurt me, Tom. You destroyed everything." I walked out of the bar, leaving him sitting there, his face a mix of guilt and shame. For the first time in my life, I felt completely alone. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. Tom's admission played on a loop in my head, each word cutting deeper than the last. A one-time thing? Was that supposed to make me feel better? Did he think reducing their betrayal to a single night somehow absolved them of guilt? By the time I reached the house, my anger had crystallized into determination. I was done pretending. It was time to confront Emily. She was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, sipping tea and scrolling on her laptop like nothing had changed. Seeing her there, so calm, so oblivious, made my blood boil. "Emily," I said sharply. She looked up, startled. Mark? What's wrong? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I grabbed her phone from the counter and tossed it onto the table in front of her. Unlock it. Her face turned pale. What? Why? Just do it, I said through gritted teeth. She hesitated, her fingers trembling as she entered the passcode. I snatched the phone and opened her messages with Tom. I didn't need to scroll far to find the proof I was looking for. Do you want to explain this? I asked, my voice cold as I held up the phone, showing her the incriminating texts. Emily's eyes widened, and she stammered, Mark, don't you dare lie to me. I cut her off. Tom already told me everything. Her mouth opened and closed like she was struggling to find the words. Finally, she dropped her head into her hands and whispered, I'm so sorry. Sorry. I repeated, my voice rising. You're sorry? That's all you have to say? How long, Emily? How long has this been going on? She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. It was one time, she said, her voice barely audible. It was a mistake. Don't, I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. Don't insult me with excuses. A mistake doesn't happen in secret. A mistake doesn't involve months of calls and texts. A mistake doesn't ruin a marriage. Emily sobbed, reaching out for me, but I stepped back, her touch like acid on my skin. Why, Emily? I demanded. Why Tom? My best friend? Do you know what this has done to me? I didn't mean for it to happen, she cried. I felt, I don't know, lonely, unappreciated. It just happened, Mark. I swear, I didn't want to hurt you. Her words felt like a slap. Lonely? Unappreciated? I'd given her everything. My love, my trust, my life. And she repaid me with betrayal. I can't do this, I said, my voice hollow. You've destroyed us, Emily. You've destroyed everything. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving her sobbing at the table. For the first time in my life, I didn't know what came next. I spent the night on the couch, though sleep never came. My mind refused to stop spinning, replaying every moment, every word, every sign I'd missed. The house was eerily quiet, except for the occasional sound of Emily's muffled sobs upstairs. Morning came, and with it the harsh light of reality. I didn't know how to face the day, let alone the wreckage of my marriage. The kids would be home later that afternoon, and I had no idea how to shield them from the storm brewing beneath the surface. Emily came downstairs around 9 a.m., her eyes swollen and red. She approached me cautiously, as if afraid I might lash out again. Mark, she said softly, her voice hoarse. We need to talk. I stood up, towering over her, my anger still simmering just beneath the surface. What else is there to say, Emily? You cheated on me. With Tom, of all people. What's left to discuss? She wrung her hands, her gaze fixed on the floor. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But I want to fix this. I want to fix us. Fix us, I repeated, incredulous. How do you propose we do that, Emily? Do you think an apology is going to erase what you've done? That I can just forget you betrayed me? I don't expect you to forget, she said, tears streaming down her face again. But I love you, Mark. I don't want to lose you. Please just, let's talk to someone. A counselor, a therapist, anything. I'll do whatever it takes. Her words felt hollow, like a desperate attempt to hold on to something she knew was already slipping away. Do you even understand what you've done? I asked, my voice cracking. You didn't just hurt me, Emily. You tore apart everything we built together. You've shattered my trust, my faith in you, and in us. She looked up at me then, her eyes pleading. I know, Mark. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I want to try. For us, for the kids. The mention of Lily and Max hit me like a sucker punch. They were the only reason I hadn't walked out the door the night before. I don't know if there's anything left to save, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. Her touch was cold, trembling, but for a moment, I let it linger. I could see the regret in her eyes, the desperation. But was it enough? Could it ever be enough? I need time, I said finally, pulling my hand away. Time to think. Time to figure out what I want. Right now, I can't give you any answers. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. Take all the time you need, she whispered. I'll wait. As she turned and walked back upstairs, I sat back down, staring at nothing. Time, she said, but all the time in the world couldn't erase the pain she'd caused. The uneasy quiet of the house was suffocating. Emily stayed upstairs most of the day, while I busied myself with menial tasks to avoid confronting my own emotions. But one thing kept gnawing at me: the need to face Tom again. It wasn't enough to hear his half-hearted confession in that bar. I needed answers, clarity, something to piece together the wreckage of what they'd done. So that evening I drove to his place. Tom lived alone in a modest townhouse a few miles away. As I stood at his front door, my chest tightened with anger and apprehension. The man I'd trusted most had betrayed me, and now I was here, forcing myself to look him in the eye again. The door creaked open, and there he was, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen him. His usually confident posture was slouched, his expression weary. "Mark," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "I wasn't sure if you'd come by." "Let me in," I said curtly, not waiting for an invitation as I stepped past him. The living room was dimly lit, cluttered with discarded clothes and empty beer bottles. It was clear he hadn't been handling this well either. Not that I cared. "Talk," I demanded, turning to face him. "No more excuses. No more half-truths. Tell me everything." Tom sighed, sinking onto the couch and running a hand through his hair. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he started. "It was just, we were drunk and I—" "Don't give me that crap," I interrupted, my voice rising. "You don't accidentally sleep with someone, Tom. You made a choice. Both of you did." He nodded, his face etched with shame. "You're right. I can't deny that. It started at one of those game nights. You'd gone to bed early, and Emily stayed up. We got to talking. And one thing led to another." "Talking?" I scoffed. "What the hell were you talking about that led to sleeping with my wife?" Tom hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. "She said she felt neglected, like you didn't see her anymore. I don't know, man. She opened up, and I was stupid enough to listen." I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. "So what? You thought you'd swoop in and give her the attention she wanted? Is that it? You thought you were doing her a favor?" "It wasn't like that," he protested weakly. "I didn't plan for any of this, Mark. I swear." "Of course not," I said bitterly. "But you didn't stop it, did you? You didn't think about what this would do to me, to my family, to our friendship." Tom looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "I know I screwed up. I've lost your trust, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. But for what it's worth, it's over. It hasn't happened again, and it never will." His words rang hollow, a flimsy attempt to downplay the damage he'd caused. "Over," I repeated. "Do you think that matters? You've already crossed the line, Tom. You and Emily both." Silence hung heavy between us, the weight of his betrayal suffocating. I wanted to hit him, to make him feel a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. "You're dead to me," I said finally, my voice cold and even. "Don't call me, don't text me, and don't come near my family again. You're out of my life." Tom didn't argue, didn't beg for another chance. He simply nodded, his shoulders slumping further. "I'm sorry, Mark," he whispered. Without another word, I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sliver of clarity. Tom was gone from my life, but the mess he'd left behind was far from over. The drive home was a blur, the rage simmering beneath my skin. I couldn't stop replaying Tom's words, each one cutting deeper than the last. He'd admitted it, laid it all bare. There was no undoing what had been done, no erasing the betrayal etched into my memory. When I pulled into the driveway, the house loomed before me, its warm glow feeling oddly foreign. Inside, Emily sat on the couch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red and puffy. "Did you see him?" she asked hesitantly. I didn't respond at first, just stared at her. She looked so small, so vulnerable, but I couldn't afford to soften. "Not now." "Yes," I finally said. "I saw him. He told me everything." She flinched, her hands trembling in her lap. "Mark, I don't know how to make this right." "You can't," I said bluntly. "You can't undo this, Emily. You can't take it back." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she stood, moving closer to me. "Please, Mark, let me try. I'll do anything, therapy, counseling, whatever it takes. I love you, and I love our family. I don't want to lose you." Her words felt like knives. I wanted to believe her, to cling to the life we'd built together, but the cracks in our foundation were too deep. "Do you even understand what you've done?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You didn't just betray me. You betrayed us, our family, the life we built together. How am I supposed to come back from that?" "I made a mistake," she whispered, her tears falling freely now. "A horrible, awful mistake. But it doesn't have to define us, Mark. We can rebuild. We can find a way forward." Her desperation was palpable, but I couldn't ignore the voice in my head screaming that it was too late. The love we'd shared had been tainted, and no amount of apologies could erase the damage. "I need space," I said finally, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "I can't do this right now, Emily. I can't look at you without seeing him." Her face crumpled, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. "Mark, please," she begged. "Don't do this. Don't give up on us." "I'm not giving up," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm trying to survive, and right now that means stepping away." The room fell silent, save for the sound of her quiet sobs. I grabbed a bag from the closet and began packing a few essentials. Each item I stuffed into the bag felt like a nail in the coffin of our life together. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "To a hotel," I said. "I'll figure out the rest later." She didn't try to stop me, just stood there, tears streaming down her face as I walked out the door. As I drove away, the weight of what I'd just done settled over me. I was leaving the only home I'd ever known, the woman I'd once believed was my forever. But I couldn't stay, not with the ghost of her betrayal haunting every corner. For the first time in years, I was truly alone. The hotel room was sterile and unwelcoming, but it suited me just fine. I wasn't looking for comfort. I wasn't sure I even deserved it. All I needed was space. A space where the memories of Emily and Tom didn't loom over me like a storm cloud. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the plain beige walls. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Emily had been texting and calling nonstop since I'd left. I ignored every attempt, leaving the messages unread and the calls unanswered. I needed silence. For the first time in what felt like days, I let myself fully unravel. The weight of the betrayal, the anger, the sadness, all crashed over me like a tidal wave. My chest tightened, and before I knew it, I was crying, a deep, guttural sob that I couldn't stop even if I wanted to. This wasn't who I was. I was the guy who held it together, the steady one who always found a way forward. But now everything felt fractured. The life I thought I had, the love I thought was unshakable. It was all a lie. As the tears subsided, a strange calm took their place. I grabbed a notebook from my bag and started writing. It wasn't something I usually did, but I felt an overwhelming need to make sense of everything. I listed every question swirling in my mind. When did it start? What did I miss? Were there signs I ignored? Is this something I can forgive? The last question loomed largest, its weight almost unbearable. Forgiveness. Was it even possible? Did I want to forgive her? Or was I clinging to a shred of hope because the alternative was too painful to face? By the time I finished writing, the sun had set, and the room was cloaked in darkness. I set the notebook aside and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I thought of Lily and Max, of their innocent faces and the way their laughter could fill a room. They were the only bright spot in this mess, the only thing grounding me. But how could I protect them from the fallout of Emily's choices? Sleep came eventually, though it was restless and filled with fragmented dreams. Images of Emily and Tom haunted me, their laughter echoing in my ears. When I woke up the next morning, the ache in my chest was as fresh as ever. I knew I couldn't stay in limbo forever. Decisions had to be made, and soon. But for now, all I could do was survive. I spent the next morning pacing the hotel room, going back and forth on what to do. I couldn't avoid Emily forever, but the thought of seeing her again made my stomach churn. Worse still was the thought of explaining any of this to Lily and Max. By early afternoon, I knew I couldn't delay it any longer. I picked up my phone and called Emily, bracing myself for whatever came next. She answered on the first ring. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you for calling. Are you okay?" Her concern felt misplaced, almost insulting, but I pushed the anger aside. "I'm coming to see the kids," I said flatly. "Of course," she replied quickly. "They've been asking about you. Do you want to talk to them now, or—"
No, interrupta.
"I'll be there in an hour." When I arrived, Lily and Max were sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by crayons and paper. Their faces lit up when they saw me, and they ran over, wrapping their arms around me in a way that made my chest ache. "Daddy!" Lily exclaimed. "We missed you." "I missed you too, sweetheart," I said, kneeling to hug them tighter. Emily hovered in the doorway, watching silently. I avoided looking at her, focusing instead on the kids. "Why were you gone?" Max asked, his innocent brown eyes searching mine. I hesitated, the weight of his question pressing down on me. "I just needed a little break," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But I'm here now. Are you and Mommy mad at each other?" Lily asked, her voice small. My throat tightened. I glanced at Emily, who looked stricken. "Sometimes grown-ups need to work through things," I said carefully. "But we both love you very much, and that's what matters most." They seemed to accept my answer, though I could see the confusion lingering in their eyes. I hated that they were being dragged into this, hated that their innocence was being chipped away by something they couldn't even understand. For the next hour, I played with them, trying to create some sense of normalcy. We built towers out of blocks, colored pictures of animals, and laughed like nothing was wrong. But every time I caught Emily's gaze, the tension crept back in, heavy and unrelenting. When it was time to leave, Lily clung to my leg. "Don't go, Daddy," she pleaded. "I'll see you soon," I promised, my voice breaking. "I love you both so much." As I stepped outside, Emily followed me onto the porch. "Mark," she began, her voice trembling. "Not now," I said sharply, cutting her off. She nodded, tears streaming down her face as I walked away. The drive back to the hotel was silent. The image of my kids' confused faces etched into my mind. They deserved better than this. They deserved stability, love, and a home that wasn't crumbling around them. But how could I give them that when my own world was in pieces? The weight of it all was too much to carry alone. I needed guidance, clarity, someone who could help me sort through the chaos in my mind. So, I called my older brother, David, the person I'd always turn to when life got messy. David had a way of cutting through the noise, seeing things from angles I couldn't. When I explained everything, the texts, Tom, Emily's confession, he listened in silence, letting me spill every painful detail. When I finally finished, he exhaled deeply. "Damn, Mark," he said. "I don't even know where to start. I can't believe Emily and Tom would do this to you." "Neither can I," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "I keep going over it in my head, trying to figure out what I missed, how I didn't see this coming." "It's not your fault," David said firmly. "Don't let their choices make you question yourself. This is on them, not you." "I don't know if I can forgive her," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know if I want to." David was quiet for a moment. "Look, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but whatever decision you make, you need to be sure it's the right one for you and for the kids. If you think there's a chance to rebuild, then fight for it. But if you can't move past this, You need to be honest with yourself and with Emily. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I just don't know how to face her. Every time I look at her, all I see is what she did. That's normal, David said. It's going to take time. But here's the thing. Time won't fix this on its own. You need to talk to her, to figure out if there's anything left to salvage. And if there's not, then you need to let go. His words hit me hard. I'd been so focused on the betrayal, on the anger, that I hadn't allowed myself to think about the future, what I wanted it to look like, whether Emily had a place in it. Thanks, Dave, I said after a long pause. I needed to hear that. Anytime, little brother, he replied. And remember, whatever happens, you're not alone in this. I've got your back. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of the hotel room, David's words echoing in my mind. Letting go. The thought of it felt both terrifying and freeing. Could I really do it? Could I walk away from Emily, from the life we'd built, and start over? Or was there still a part of me that wanted to fight for what we had, even if it meant risking more pain? I didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time in days, I felt a small glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I'd find my way through this. The next evening, I found myself back in the house. Emily had asked me to come by once the kids were asleep. We need to talk, she'd said, her voice cautious but resolute. I agreed it was time to stop circling around the inevitable. When I arrived, the house was quiet. Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, a mug of tea cradled in her hands. She looked tired, her face drawn and pale. Thanks for coming, she said softly, motioning for me to sit. I took the chair across from her, keeping a deliberate distance. What is it, Emily? She stared at the mug for a moment, as if gathering her thoughts. I know you don't want to hear this, but I need to say it. I'm sorry, Mark, for everything, for betraying you, for hurting you. I wish I could take it all back. Her words were raw, her voice trembling. I wanted to believe her, to let her apologies soothe the wounds she'd caused. But the damage ran too deep. You keep saying that, I said, my tone measured. But sorry doesn't fix this, Emily. Sorry doesn't erase what you did. I know, she whispered, but I don't want to give up on us. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right, to earn back your trust. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just, please don't walk away. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. She looked so broken, so remorseful. But I couldn't ignore the voice in my head screaming that some things couldn't be undone. Emily, I said slowly, you made a choice. You chose to betray me, to betray us. I didn't get a say in that. And now, I have to live with the consequences of your choices. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't look away. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, she said, but I'm asking for it anyway. For the kids, for everything we've built together. Please, Mark. Her plea hit me like a punch to the gut. I thought of Lily and Max, their innocent faces, their laughter. They deserved a happy home, parents who loved each other. But was that even possible anymore? I don't know if I can forgive you, I admitted, my voice cracking. I don't know if I can ever look at you and not see what you did. She reached across the table, her hand trembling as it hovered near mine. Please, Mark, give me a chance. Let me prove to you that I can be better. That we can be better. For a moment, I hesitated, torn between the life we'd shared and the betrayal that had shattered it. Finally, I stood, her hand falling away. I need more time, I said. I need to figure out what I want, what's best for me, and for the kids. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Take all the time you need, she whispered. As I left the house, the weight of her words settled over me. Could I give her a second chance? Or was it time to draw the line and move forward on my own? Days turned into weeks as I wrestled with the decision that would shape the rest of my life. I threw myself into work and spent every moment I could with Lily and Max, their laughter and innocence a welcome refuge from the storm raging in my heart. Emily kept her distance, respecting my request for space. She didn't bombard me with messages or demands, but I knew she was waiting, hoping for some sign that I'd be willing to rebuild what we'd lost. One evening, after tucking the kids into bed, I sat in the quiet of my temporary apartment and stared at the framed photo of our family I'd brought with me. It was from a trip to the lake last summer. All of us smiling, arms wrapped around each other. We looked so happy, so complete. I thought about what David had said, about making a decision that was right for me and the kids. And for the first time, I felt clarity. The next morning, I called Emily and asked her to meet me at a nearby park. It was a place we used to take the kids when they were younger, back when life felt simpler. When she arrived, she looked nervous, her hands fidgeting as she sat down beside me on the bench. "Thanks for coming," I said, breaking the silence. She nodded, her eyes searching mine. Have you decided?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself. "I have." Her face tensed, bracing for the worst. "Emily," I began, "what you did broke something in me, in us. I don't know if it can ever fully heal, but I've realized something. The kids need both of us. They need stability, love, and two parents who are willing to put them first." She swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears. "So, what does that mean?" "It means I'm willing to try," I said, "for them. But it's going to take time to rebuild trust, time to figure out if we can really make this work again. And I need you to understand, Emily, that this is your one chance. There's no going back if this happens again." The relief on her face was palpable, tears streaming down her cheeks as she reached for my hand. "Thank you, Mark," she whispered. "I won't let you down. I promise." I didn't take her hand but nodded slowly, the weight of the decision settling over me. This isn't going to be easy. We'll need therapy, boundaries, and complete honesty from now on. If we're going to do this, we have to do it right. "We will," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "Whatever it takes, I'll do it. I'll prove to you that I'm worth trusting again." As we sat there in the park, the sun setting behind us, I felt a fragile glimmer of hope. The road ahead wouldn't be smooth, and there were no guarantees. But for the sake of the life we'd built, and for the kids who depended on us, I was willing to take the first step. For now, it was enough. If you like our content, leave a like and subscribe for more videos.